As the elevation gradually increased, the dense broadleaf forest transitioned into the characteristic high mountain coniferous forests and Yushan cane, arrow bamboo. After pushing on for several hours, an open space appeared in front of the team. "That must be the Gate of Nanhu," someone said. We stepped out of the thick woods, and the scene before our eyes was a natural gateway cleverly formed by fallen trees. They stood vertically on the trail, creating a frame-like structure. This is what hikers refer to as the Nanhu Gate. It is not a magnificent ruin, but rather a clear geographical marker, signaling that we had completed the first phase of the journey, the climb from the trailhead toward the mountain ridge. This gate is the prelude to the trial, not the climax of the journey. We needed to remain alert and focused, as the more grueling challenges still lay ahead. Leaving the Nanhu Gate, the path was no longer a simple steep ascent but turned into a gentle traverse along the mountain ridge. This section of the journey marked our formal entry into the periphery of the alpine ecosystem. The vegetation began to change, and the views opened up accordingly. Duojiatun Mountain, with an elevation of 2,795 meters, is not famous for the difficulty of its summit, but its geographical location makes it an excellent viewing platform for the 100 peaks, a term referring to Taiwan's Baiyu list. This is what hikers call the Jesus light, or crepuscular rays. It is not a dazzling glare, but rather a sacred and revelatory spectacle. The beams of light fall upon the distant valleys and dense forests, seemingly segmenting the landscape before us into a temporary, mysterious domain. The new Yunling Cabin marks the strenuous endpoint of the first day's journey on the Nanhu Massif itinerary. The first point we reached on the second day was Shenmajen Mountain, which stands at an elevation of 3,141 meters. Among the Baiyu peaks, this summit might not be the most eye-catching. Its peak lacks a striking sharpness, instead presenting as a vast, flat expanse of land. Following Shenmajen Mountain is one of the most heart-lifting and refreshing sections of the Nanhu Massif, the Shenmajen Grassland. This grassland is not simply a flat area, but a high mountain gentle ridge with undulating terrain and an extremely expansive view. The trail meanders through it, flanked by endless stretches of Yushan cane, arrow bamboo, and alpine vegetation, which shimmer with a calm gold and green under the sun. Walking here, the hiker feels not oppression, but a sense of release. We surrendered our bodies to this vast space. Every step beneath our feet felt steady and rhythmic. The air was crisp and fresh. Taking a deep breath felt as though we were inhaling the pure essence of the high-altitude world into our lungs. The significance of the grassland lies in the spiritual buffer it provides. It acts like a green carpet laid out by nature, guiding us toward the more arduous challenges ahead. Here, we stopped focusing solely on the muddy path or the fatigue of the steep slopes, and instead began to connect with the surrounding environment. Next to the summit marker on Nanhu North Peak, at an elevation of 3,536 meters, I was adjusting my gear and savoring the panoramic high mountain view. 3 young people who had arrived a few minutes earlier were taking photos nearby to commemorate their ascent. One young man had a spirited, handsome face, the second was equally strikingly tall and smart-looking, and the young woman possessed a healthy, radiant beauty. Their smiles were beaming with the sense of accomplishment that comes from reaching the summit. The 5 rock peaks, Hui and Feng, as the name suggests, are composed of several sections of exposed rock ridges. The elevation here exceeds 3,500 meters, and the terrain is extremely rugged and precipitous, with the path tracing the edge of the sheer cliffs. The rocks are gray-black, exhibiting a coarse texture characteristic of high mountain weathering, providing direct and primal handholds and footholds. Due to the complex topography, some sections require using all 4 limbs, and movement even relies on fixed ropes and cables. Every step demands precise judgment and a stable center of gravity. However, this challenge yields an unparalleled majesty. As we traversed this high-altitude corridor, the vista was completely unobstructed. Looking west, the view plunged into the deep source of the Lanyang River. Our gaze soared over layers of cloud seas or mountains, allowing us to overlook the contours of the northern section of the central mountain range. On extremely clear days, the holy ridge of the Shueshan mountain range was even clearly visible. It was the feeling of commanding a view of all the mountains, a privilege unique to high mountain ridges. Turning to the east presented a different spectacle. The precipitous cliff faces dropped sharply into the bottom of the Nanhu Creek Valley. Clouds and mist often surged up from the eastern valleys, flowing like a river over the spine of the 5 rock peaks. When sunlight pierced the clouds, the interplay of light and shadow moved rapidly in the deep valley, adding a mysterious and ever-changing color palette to the mountain mass. This layered sense of landscape made every turn a grand and dynamic oil painting. Every step on the 5 rock peaks was filled with tension, but its magnificent scenery ensured that every effort was richly rewarded. Having completed this trial, our view will be fully opened up. Right before us lies the expansive and tranquil Nanhu Cirque, and our ultimate objective, Mount Nanhu. The moment we passed the trial of the 5 rock peaks and traversed Nanhu North Peak, we officially began our descent into the Nanhu Cirque, the core of the Nanhu Massif. This downhill path was mostly composed of scree and sandy soil, demanding focused and stable steps. However, while our trekking poles supported our bodies, our minds were completely dominated by the scene unfolding before us. As the altitude dropped, the surrounding landscape changed dramatically. The world before us was no longer the fierce wind and bare rock of the ridge, but a broad, deep, ancient basin. This was the remnant carved out by glaciers tens of thousands of years ago, a vast, natural amphitheater encircled by mountains. As we ventured deeper, a sense of wonder emerged. The first wonder was the sheer scale. The main peak, East Peak, and South Peak of Mount Nanhu stood like 3 immense screens, towering around us in a posture that was both intimately close and supremely majestic. Their mountain lines were graceful and their edges distinct, presenting a rich sense of depth in the glow of the setting sun. We felt incredibly minuscule before these gigantic forms. The second wonder was the resilience and color of the vegetation. At the bottom of the Cirque, vast grasslands and Juniperus morrisonicola, Yushan juniper, formed a unique alpine cold-temperate landscape. These junipers, which have battled the wind and snow for years, grow in a low, prostrate posture. Their dark green branches cling tightly to the earth, resembling carefully crafted natural bonsai. In autumn, the grasslands take on hues of golden yellow and russet red, displaying the rich colors of an oil painting. Upon setting down the heavy backpack and entering the cabin, a dry, warm rush of air enveloped me. The low conversations of hikers, the hiss of heating stoves, and the aroma of food collectively wove a cozy yet simple atmosphere of home. Closing my eyes, the only sounds remaining were the faint wind and the steady breathing of my teammates. I knew that here, in Taiwan's most beautiful glacial cirque, I would drift into a sweet slumber, guarded by the silent majesty of the Emperor Mountain, referring to Mount Nanhu, gathering strength for the summit push tomorrow. On the morning of the third day, the mountain weather was distinctly worse than the previous 2 days. As we broke camp and set off, the sky was enveloped in a dense, gray mist, and visibility was extremely poor. The air was permeated with a damp chill, and every breath carried the coldness of moisture. We eventually reached Mount Tausai, Nanhu East Peak, at an elevation of 3,632 meters, by confirming our position using GPS and trail markers. The summit offered none of the expected open vistas. There was only endless white nothingness. A fierce wind, carrying fine icy rain, howled past, and the temperature was frigid. We allowed no excessive celebration or lingering, quickly taking photos and making our record before immediately preparing to descend. This ascent was not a test of spectacular scenery, but of adaptation to and respect for the mountain's extreme environment. Under such cold, wet, and visibility-restricted conditions, ensuring safety and maintaining calm judgment are the highest principles of alpine trekking. Mount Tausai, with its rugged terrain and severe weather, gave us a profound and solemn trial. The high mountain climate had completely shifted to extremely wet and cold, with continuous rain. It wasn't a torrential downpour, but a fine, unending cold drizzle that, like countless icy needles, relentlessly pierced our outer rain gear. The combination of low temperature and moisture made the wind chill factor feel much lower than the actual temperature. Standing on the summit of Mount Mabishan, we faced an endless expanse of gray and white. Yet, what I felt was not disappointment, but a deep sense of solid accomplishment. This completion was not earned through spectacular views, but because, in an extreme environment, we successfully overcame our physical limits and a test of will. To accomplish this remote expedition in the wet cold made the significance of this summit much heavier. The goal is now complete. The next task is to safely withdraw from this high-altitude cold region, return to the Nanhu Cabin, and prepare for the efforts of the following day. As the dark clouds gradually dissipated and the sky was cleansed, we embarked on the long journey back from the Nanhu Creek Valley to the Nanhu Cabin, located in the lower Cirque. Our pace was no longer hurried, but measured and unhurried, resonating with the valley, light and vegetation. The high mountain air after the rain was exceptionally crisp. Sunlight streamed through the thin cloud cover, illuminating the slopes on either side. The emerald green Yushan junipers and fir trees were distinctly layered in the light and shadow. Water droplets on the leaves sparkled with a crystalline brilliance, like countless diamonds bestowed by the earth. Distant peaks and the wilds. Looking up, the distant mountain ranges had shed their veil of mist, revealing resolute and majestic contours. The wide alpine grasslands, now resembling soft velvet, stretched all the way to the foot of the towering Nanhu Massif. That sense of vastness and grandeur washed away all the fatigue of the journey. This was a spiritual walk. Every step was taken on the soft tundra and stone paths, sensing the tranquility and healing of the mountain forest. Finally, as the view suddenly opened up, the Nanhu Cabin, embraced by the glacial remnants, stood quietly there. It was like a ship moored in a green bay, radiating a warm and reliable presence, welcoming us late returning travelers. All eyes were focused on the east. When the sun's first ray of light crested the serrated ridge of Nanhu East Peak or Mount Mabishan, it did not rise slowly, but rather instantly exploded like a colossal, pent-up golden flame. In that very moment, the sunlight swept across the entire Nanhu Massif with incredible speed. Leaving the lower Cirque where the Nanhu Cabin is located, the first part of the journey is an upward climb. The path often involves traversing scree and grassy slopes, requiring the use of hands and feet. With every look back, we could see the entire Nanhu Cirque gradually shrinking beneath us, resembling a massive, deep green hollow, while the main peak of Mount Nanhu cast a huge shadow behind us. As the elevation increased, the vegetation gradually shifted from dense juniper thickets to low-lying Berberis morrisonensis, Yushan barberry, and sparse arrow bamboo. Nanhu South Peak, at 3,445 meters, serving as a major watershed, requires the path to traverse a distinctive high mountain rock waterfall, stone cascade, terrain, necessitating careful selection of every foothold. Upon reaching the summit of Nanhu South Peak, the view suddenly opened up. This location not only offers a commanding perspective over the magnificent ridges of the entire Nanhu Massif but is also an excellent spot for observing the central mountain range as it extends southward. Mount Chungyangqian comes into view with its sharp, distinctive shape, delivering a sense of awe that truly embodies the phrase, "Beyond one mountain lies yet a higher mountain." The approximately 1-kilometer journey from Nanhu South Peak to Mount Babashan, at 3,449 meters, while short in distance, is full of variety. The summit of Mount Babashan is relatively gentle, but the surrounding scenery is extremely magnificent. The viewpoint at the summit offers a clear, closer view of the pyramidal shape of Mount Chungyangqian, instilling a sense of the primitive and lonely essence deep within the Great Mountains. The arrival at Mount Babashan also marked the separation of our paths with Xionggu and Zhenbao. Zhenbao was heading to Mount Chungyangqian to fulfill a personal commitment and complete his 100th Baiyue peak. We, meanwhile, had to complete our ultimate goal for the day, Mount Nanhu. After saying our goodbyes at Mount Babashan, we embarked on the final segment back toward the main peak of Mount Nanhu. This return leg was no longer a grand tour under the sun, but a trial of battling the severe alpine weather. We finally arrived at our spiritual destination amidst the cold dampness and low visibility. When the surrounding slopes finally eased, and with visibility barely extending beyond 5 meters, we at last stepped onto the flat summit platform. There was no warm sunlight, no grand vista, only the icy white wall of mist constantly whipping our faces. Summiting in such dense fog, however, bestowed upon Mount Nanhu a solemn and austere temperament. It stood like a silent giant, greeting our arrival in its most true and primal form. We quickly took that blurry yet precious summit photo in the cold wind, confirming this wet, cold, and hard-won victory. When the dawn of the 5th day arrived, the damp cold and fog that had blanketed Mount Nanhu the day before had vanished. At 6:30 a.m., the two of us organized our gear at the Nanhu Cabin and set off with the rising sun. At this moment, the golden sunlight generously poured onto the earth, coating the scree slopes and juniper forests before us with a warm halo, marking a beautiful conclusion to this magnificent journey. This was a long 12-hour descent, but the path beneath our feet was no longer lonely. We made the steep climb back out of the Cirque, then traversed the gentler paths along Songfeng Ridge and Duojiatun Mountain. Along the way, we continuously crossed paths with other hikers. Every person, whether ascending or descending, radiated the unique warmth and sincerity characteristic of the high mountains. We are now looking forward to our second trip to Yushan, Jade Mountain, in December, to reach new heights and continue writing more of our mountaineering stories on this beautiful land of Taiwan. Thank you for watching and sharing this wonderful journey. We also look forward to sharing good news upon our return from Yushan.